Heads up, some of the things we talk about in this episode could be potentially triggering, so please be advised.
Jenna, people seem to have a lot of feelings about the term victim versus survivor. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, because even when I hear it, I cannot separate it from the Destiny's Child song. Like, I'm a victim, I'm not gonna give up. Doesn't have as much of a ring to it.
No, it's not quite as catchy.
Eye of the Survivor would be a good remix on that.
We should ask Beyonce.
Yes.
Honestly, I think the word victim gets a really bad rap because it's seen as something negative. But victimhood, if we really look at victimhood, we see that it's not a judgment of someone's worth or that it's a bad thing, right? It's simply just the status of being harmed. And so I think it's important to note that survivor is a great term, but it doesn't also include all victims because not all of us end up surviving.
I totally agree. I think that even getting to a place to identify as a victim does take a lot of courage and awareness and work.
Yeah, I think it definitely carries a negative stigma. We should have more nuanced conversations about survivorhood and like victimhood. And I'm glad we have this show so that we're able to dive deep into that because we've had the chance to talk to a lot of different survivors. And for this show, we're talking to a young woman who survived a terrorist attack, which is just a whole different world.
That is a very specific and terrifying thing. And on top of the trauma of surviving something horrible, a terrorist attack specifically has so many other layers. You know, politics, religion, national identity, not really knowing what's happening as it's happening. It's very complicated.
Really complicated. But our guest, Rachel Farn, she's working through it. Less than a year after the attack, she wrote a poem to the man who nearly killed her last year.
I wish you could see the world the way I do. I wish you could cherish it the way I do. I wish you could care for it the way I do. I think I see a monster in you. I think I see my monster in you. I think I see myself in you.
Rachel doesn't see herself as a victim, and she's still working through all the layers. And she'll never forget the day that changed her life forever. It was Halloween 2017 in New York City.
Imagine for a moment you're Rachel on that day. You're hanging out with your best friend on a crisp fall afternoon. The trees are beginning to turn vivid shades of red, orange, and gold. The weather is so perfect, you don't want to go inside yet. So, you rent a bike. And you take a ride down the path along the Hudson River. As you pedal, the breeze feels soothing as it blows on your face and through your hair. That day, you hardly notice the endless streams of cars buzzing up and down West Side Highway, or any of the runners and mothers with baby strollers on the path. Some of these kids, they're wearing hilarious costumes. We've got a Wonder Woman, a jellyfish, and an astronaut. In just a few hours, the big Halloween parade will take over Greenwich Village. You look across the river to New Jersey and notice the water glints and sparkles when it catches the sun just right. Then something else catches your eye. The hard, shining metal of a white truck. That's strange. It's headed your way, from the highway into the bike path. Maybe it's got a flat tire or something's wrong with the engine. Surely the driver will turn the wheel, slam on the brakes. But before your brain has time to process what the hell is going on, the truck plows right into you.
I've been really trying to take my self-care game to the next level this year. And part of my self-care routine is making sure my hair looks fantastic 24/7, 365. Because having fresh hair color is just one of those little things that does help me feel my best. But since I travel a lot, I don't always have time to spend hours and hours in a salon. And that's why I love Madison Reed. Madison Reed is reinventing the way women color their hair. It's the quality of salon color, the convenience and affordability of at-home hair color, and it's an ammonia-free formula with ingredients that you can feel good about putting all over your head. You don't have to sacrifice the quality of your hair color just because you're short on time. With Madison Reed, you can get gorgeous, Italian-made, multi-dimensional hair color delivered straight to your door on schedule for less than $25. And if you're worried about picking a color online, don't be. Madison Reed makes it super easy. Just answer a few quick questions about your hair and you'll be finding your perfect shade in no time. Head to madison-reed.com to find your perfect color today. iSurvivor listeners will get 10% off plus free shipping on your first color kit with promo code SURVIVOR. That's code SURVIVOR at madison-reed.com. From Wondery, I'm Jenna Brister.
And I'm Wagatwe Wanjuki. And this is iSurvivor.
On this show, we tell you about the attacks, the assaults, the manipulation, the fear, and the triumphs. About the people who fought back, who won, and who live each day rising above that experience.
People like Rachel Farn who, as you heard at the top of this show, survived a terrorist attack in New York City last Halloween. Rachel shares her story with us in this episode.
We're also going to speak with Dr. Lori Punch. She's a trauma surgeon who moved to Missouri after Michael Brown's death put Ferguson on the map. Dr. Punch trains residents there to be first responders when gun violence occurs.
On Halloween of 2017, Rachel Farn was riding a bicycle along the Hudson River down the West Side Highway. Around 3 p.m, a pickup truck plowed into passengers on the Hudson River bike path. 8 people died. Farn was one of 11 people who were injured, but survived.
The driver of the truck was an Uzbek national living in New Jersey. Here's our conversation with Rachel Farn.
I never went on the bike path before, or might have, once or twice. I'm always really scared that we're biking right along with the drivers and you can't see anyone. So it's always like a trust system for everyone in the road. That day I was on 65th and 5th Avenue. That's where my best friend works. And I got a phone call from Chase Bank saying that they found my wallet because I lost it the weekend before. So I decided to bike down, and then I biked on the bike path. So I got to the Chase Bank, I picked up my wallet, and then I got on the bike, and then within like 5 minutes, the truck came down and then hit the people in front of me, and then my leg, and then just kept going. And so that was really the whole entire event for me. It was like a split second. It was like a gradual, trauma, I feel like, because at the beginning, I thought that I got hit by a drunk driver and that it was my fault for not paying attention. So I was sitting there in so much pain and then stressed out about the people in front of me. I didn't know. I was like, why wasn't I paying attention? I'm so dumb. I'm this is how I always am. I'm so careless, and this is why I lost my wallet, and now I got hit by a truck. If I saw him coming fast, and I could have warned the people to move out of the way. And so I was like, I'm going to have to live the rest of my life. Or are they dead? And so I was freaking out. And then all of a sudden a lady ran down the road, and she was it was on purpose. And I was like, okay, what's happening? So then I just became hyper aware of the situation, and the police came. Sometime later, it was confirmed that it was a terrorist attack. So then I became really present to, wow, I almost died. And it was the blink of an eye, and it didn't even faze me. And so then I was trying to relive the experience so that it could affect me. I missed it. So then that's why it was a gradual development of
the trauma, like you said, the gradual trauma.
It's my grieving period was done in 3 hours from that time when everything happened. I just didn't have time to grieve for the people who died in front of me because they're such big events, and they're so little compared to the fact that this was a terrorist attack. And then I was okay, well, I'm alive, and so I'm so lucky. And because I became so present to the fact that I almost died, it was just okay, what if I did? It just made me reevaluate all of my priorities, the things that I was chasing, the things I was holding on to that I wouldn't let go of, the anger, the fighting. I just realized that none of it really matters. At the end of the day, if I died now, I wouldn't even care about the fight I just had with my mom. I don't know. And I was just I just wasted all of my life, blaming and hating and feeling entitled. And in that moment, I was just I just wanted to make sure that my family knew how much I loved them.
I totally get that. As someone who's gone through periods of not speaking to my own mom, and I think that's very relatable.
I was just so grateful that I could tell my mom how much I loved her and that, mean it.
And then especially in the wake of this,
yeah,
know that there's not that unfinished business, that you'd already made amends with her. Did an ambulance show up, or what was the experience for you with your injured leg and also taking in the entire scene? That's overwhelming, from going from being this is my fault, I should have known, then to being oh no, this is something completely different that I never could have seen coming.
while I was on the ground. I think I was one of the only conscious people. I think I was like the last person to be sent to the hospital. And then I had to remain like really calm because there's like people's lives that are still at risk and we don't know what's going on. And like I was just hyper aware of where I was, the pain, like, okay, like I just have to cooperate and just, wait.
Then it was secure. I think they got the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were taken to the hospital, and were you able to call family or get help?
I have two really close friends that I called. The one that I just had lunch with, I was biking back up to her, so I called her and let her know. And then I had another friend who works in the city, and so I called him. And so they both met me at the hospital when the ambulance finally took me.
How long were you in the hospital?
Just the night.
Just the night.
Day and the night, yeah. I broke my foot and ankle, and I had like a huge gash on my ankle too, and that's what took the longest to heal. Because the boot that you wear to hold the bones in, every time I walk, it like rubs it, so it never like closes. So yeah, so that sucked. My friend had a car, so she drove us home to Jersey, and then they took the day off and then took care of me. They had to like bathe me.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote a poem that gave you a chance to address your attacker directly, and it's called A Letter to My Terrorist. And if you'd like to, we would love to hear it.
I wish you could see the world the way I do. I wish you could cherish it the way I do. I wish you could care for it the way I do. I think I see a monster in you. I think I see my monster in you. I think I see myself in you. I wish I could ease your suffering. I wish I could make you seek redemption. I wish I could make you see the pain you caused. I wish I could show you what your blaming cost. Maybe then would you seek redemption. I think I see my monster in you. 3 p.m. you hit me with a truck on West Street in Vestry. They say it was on purpose. They say you don't regret it. Is that true? I want to know why. I want to know how you came to be, how you came to me, how you got to where you are, how I can fix you so I can figure out how to fix the world. Am I asking too much? Saifu, Saipov, we are strangers, yet I will always feel connected to you. You caused unspeakable pain in the world, but I wonder how much of it you blame on the world. Are you like me? Are you lost like me? Are you sad like me? Are you mad like me? Did you have dreams like me? Did you want love like me? Did you give up like me? And after what you've done, am I supposed to act like you? Supposed to attack like you? Do I blame like you? Do I hate like you? See the world the way you do? Take an eye for an eye and hope for you to die? Aren't we already blind?
It's amazing.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. So good.
Yeah.
It's a really good poem. I really like it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. What was it like to survive something so public, right? Like this is not even just a personal trauma, but this is something that like everyone is talking about. Did that have an impact on your recovery and your journey since then? And how has it impacted you?
Yeah, it's impacted me tremendously. It's shifted all of my priorities, but it's also cleared a pathway. I'm feeling a sense of having a calling, something that I can contribute to 100%, and something that I had given up on working in New York City, working with corporate companies, and I felt really disillusioned about what I could really do. I think it's really amazing to meet people like you who like are actively doing it. And so I feel grateful to be able to be a part of a community, to be able to be a part of, this side of humankind.
Yeah, I'm
Perfect way of saying
too.
it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here with us.
What's your hope for people who hear your story?
I mean, I hope for us coming closer to some kind of world peace, those things. But it overwhelms me, obviously, trying to think about how to contribute to that. And I feel like at this point, all we have is the present. And we can choose however we want to live it. And I think for me, with all the blessings I've received from what happened, if I've been, awakened in some kind of way, I want to be able to share that. The thing that made me relate so much to Saifulu was because of how much suffering I experienced, and the feeling of not being loved and how much it devastated and it destroyed my relationships with people in my life. And it was all because I didn't feel loved. And I feel like a lot of people experience that. And it just manifests in a different way. And I feel like if I could just, whoever I meet, just let them know that they are loved and, they're doing a good job. And what else is there to do? Because, yeah, we could say that it's all going to go to shit anyways. Like, why do we have to care? But why not? And I've become so much more present to the goodness that is alive and well in the world, and I'm drawn to that, and I want to be a part of that, and I just feel really grateful for the support, and I want to be able to support the people who don't have the kind of blessings that I have and the kind of privileges that I've been given. Just spread love and compassion, and I feel like that's the only thing that's ever combated hatred and anger.
Thank you, Rachel, for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I think your poem is just really powerful, and I think it just expresses really well a lot of the complex emotions that survivors can have. So thank you for putting that out there.
And thank you for doing what you guys do.
Wow, Rachel and her story are just incredible.
Absolutely. Something that really struck me was what she said in describing those few moments right after she got hit. She immediately, first of all, blamed herself, wondering, was I biking in the wrong place? Which I think is very relatable. We're always like, oh,
Totally.
no, did I do this? Did I cause this major trauma?
Right.
And then it was those precious few minutes after where it was determined that her injuries were the least life-threatening. So there were some other people who were being taken in ambulances, and she was conscious. So she was helped later. And I survived several moped, scooter, and taxi cab crashes. I think the last one was the worst one. And it was in Santa Monica, and I was on my scooter. And I was on the way to go right before a show. And I had like a bag of grapes and like a protein shake in the top case. It's like the little hard shell case in the back of a scooter. And I remember after I'd gone down and like I hit my face with my helmet and my wrists and my legs. So I was like bleeding in different parts, but I like popped up, and then I sat on the curb for a second, and the Uber driver pulled over, and he didn't even get out of the car. He had someone in the back.
Rude.
Someone was riding. Yeah. And he was so like shaken. Like he was so scared that I was hurt that my reaction was to hug him. And I was like, dude, I'm alive. You need to check your blind spots because you hit me with your hood. So you're not good at driving, and you should probably not be an Uber driver. Then I remember after when the fire department came, they checked my legs and they were like, okay, is anything broken, whatever. And I remember in that, I was like, I felt so unequipped to handle what was happening. Like I had a leg gash, and I remember I called like a couple friends, and no one could come pick me up. So this is embarrassing, but I had to Uber home from getting hit by an Uber. I had called everybody, and so I put my scooter in a parking garage, and I was like, I can't believe I'm fucking doing this. Wow. And I didn't tell them as they were driving me home in the rain. I was like, my leg was bleeding, and I was like, just get home. You're in so much pain. And yeah. So one of the bystanders who came out was a guy who worked at a salon across the street. Mm-hmm. So he ran over and sat with me and was like helping call people on my phone. And then he offered me a free haircut. I was like, thanks, man.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it was very sweet. He's like, you look really sad. I'm like, yeah, I just got hit by a car. I'm pretty sad, but my hair's fine.
And, while not all of us can offer free haircuts as like intervention while someone's waiting for medical help.
Yeah, coolest first responder ever.
Right? But
like a glam new cut.
Oh my gosh, like you're sad. A haircut will fix that, but it is important for us to think about like what would we do in these situations, right? Like what would I do if I saw someone did that, or if I saw you on the street, right? Like, and you're hurt. I didn't realize there's things for us to learn, just like normal people. Not normal. I'm not saying everyone else is abnormal. Civilians.
Townspeople.
What can we do? Because I think it's easy just to be like, call a doctor, or like just take me to a hospital. But there are things that we can do that are safe, that can really save a life even.
Absolutely. Especially when with injuries where you're bleeding out.
Yeah.
That there are certain things. Like I think I might have told you about this when I was in Venice, and I showed up after this guy had been hit by a car. He was on his bicycle. And I went outside, I remember, because I heard the crash and people screaming. But when I went outside to look, everyone was standing in a circle, like around the intersection, but no one had approached him. And he was with it. He was conscious. And I was like, so no one's going to go talk to the guy who's like, bleeding from the face. And so I ran over. And then, of course, luckily, the paramedics said to put a compress on the wound and don't drink any water, which is great because people were offering him water. And I was like, no.
Yeah, imagine if everyone knew how to handle emergencies when they happen in public places. It could save lives, especially where some places it can take up to 30 minutes for people to respond to emergencies.
And terrorist attacks are super uncommon. And we hear more about school shootings, almost on the regular, and gun violence. And in both, we do need to know what to do for bystanders. And that's why we called Lori Punch and talked to her about her Stop the Bleed campaign.
Dr. Lori Punch. She's a trauma surgeon, and she teaches residents in Ferguson, Missouri to be first responders to gun violence in their community.
Dr. Punch, thank you so much for joining us. So you moved to Ferguson after Michael Brown was shot. Everyone knows that was a major story. Brown was an unarmed black teenager shot by the white police officer Darren Wilson, and a grand jury found Wilson to be not guilty in Brown's death. And this, of course, set off a national debate about police brutality, gun violence in Ferguson. Did this factor into your decision to move to St. Louis from Baltimore?
Oh, absolutely. I actually had lived in Baltimore for 11 years, and for 2.5 years was actually living in Houston. So there was a little bit of time between my time in Baltimore and my time in St. Louis. And I was recruited to join faculty at Barnes Jewish Hospital and Washington University from folks who knew me back in Baltimore. They were building the trauma program here. I have to say, when I first got the invitation, although I loved the folks who were trying to get me to come to St. Louis, I was sort of nervous. I'm a single mom of a 5-year-old child. I myself am black, and we actually are a multiracial family, and I was very nervous about what it was going to be to raise my child here, and for myself to live here, and for myself to be part of the institution here. So actually, when I came and interviewed, I said, you got to take me to Ferguson. It was about 6 months after the riots, and I really needed to understand what was going on. And I am in no way a Ferguson expert. I think the situation that arose there was exceptionally complicated, and the people living there went through some stuff that I just cannot imagine. But what I did know when I went there is this. There are many, many, many wonderful, loving, amazing people in Ferguson of all colors, size, and shapes. And the physical space that makes up much of Ferguson really offered to me a unique opportunity to live really better than I've ever lived anywhere in my life before. And it has not disappointed. I love Ferguson. I love the people there. I am humbled by the process I've seen them go through. I know there are a lot of different opinions, but the bottom line is people are working and doing and living and striving to be their best, despite tremendous challenges, recovering from what was a really, really difficult 6 to 12 months.
Could you tell us about the focus of your work in Ferguson?
Yes. So I am a trauma surgeon at the Barnes Jewish Hospital, which is the largest local trauma center for adults. I was really burdened, if you will, to try to do more for the community than simply care for people after they had been shot, working only from within the hospital. And actually, after interacting with a local group called Better Family Life, a group that really seeks to promote and engage the family as the structure of hope and healing for St. Louis, I really became excited about one of their missions in particular, which was to run gun violence de-escalation centers. The model there, which is very powerful, is to basically identify conflict where gun violence has been involved, and then to do a great deal of work to de-escalate the situation so that more conflict doesn't arrive and more people get hurt.
Absolutely. And especially in densely populated areas. And a person who is bleeding can die from blood loss in about 5 minutes or less. And that's not much time. So how do you teach people with no medical training to control someone's bleeding there on site?
So yeah, even in the best of circumstances, most emergency medical service providers average 5 to 7 minutes and really longer to get to a scene after someone has called 911. The blood can rush from your body so fast that even in less than 5 minutes, you can lose your life. So the idea of the Stop the Bleed campaign is to teach people to first recognize that help needs to be alerted. So to call 911, that's A, alert. And then to B, see where the bleeding is coming from and see if the bleeding is severe. That's B, bleeding. And then after those two steps, to do everything you can do to stop the bleed by C, compressing. The class teaches different approaches to compressing bleeding in different areas of the body based on what material you have with you at the time, whether all you have is a sheet or your shirt, or if you have a complex trauma bleeding control kit. It teaches you the things that you can do and the things that you can't do to stop bleeding. And the biggest thing is basically using direct pressure in areas that are bleeding and applying a tourniquet. Tourniquets save lives for sure. There have been a lot of scientific studies that have shown, both in military and in civilian environments, tourniquets placed on arms or legs create significant decrease in the amount of deaths that occur. Stopping bleeding from an arm or a leg is one of the most changeable things that we can have access to when it comes to bleeding-related deaths. We teach people how to apply tourniquets, how to hold pressure, how to identify bleeding, and how to do it in a way that they can stay calm and stay focused and save a life.
Absolutely.
We say it's an hour of your life that can save a life.
And especially in situations where people are probably in shock, there's a lot unfolding. Having those tools in your back pocket really can save a life. I had an experience with that last month. A cyclist had been hit by a car right outside my apartment, and I ran out, and there were people around, but I called 911, and they luckily told us, get something to compress because he had a laceration on his face and legs. But as a bystander was giving the victim water from a water bottle, the medic on the phone was like, don't give them any water. So I was like, stop, and batted the bottle out of their hand because that seems like something that, oh yeah, this person's traumatized, let's give them a bunch of water, when really that's not what they need at all. They needed compression, they needed to stay calm, stay seated. Ambulance is on his way. So it's definitely important for everyone to kind of know these things that aren't so common knowledge or haven't been before.
Yeah. If you think about it, injury is the number one cause of death in people aged 1 to 44. I'm arguing that the Stop the Bleed campaign is almost primary care for young people, that knowing how to stop bleeding is an essential skill set that really everyone should know because of exactly what you're talking about. Because the truth is, young people are most likely to have a health problem related to injury. And the thing about it is, when someone gets hurt, everyone gets stressed out. I get stressed out when someone gets hurt, and I have to really go back to my training and the algorithms that I've learned to be able to approach things methodically. We have a lot of things that we do in medicine that are ABC. You don't forget kindergarten when you're stressed out. You can go back to the basics and say, okay, what am I doing first? What am I doing second? What am I doing third? And it really, really helps organize yourself. The thing you say about shock is super important. We know that once somebody goes into shock, really bad shock, they're passed out, they've already lost a huge amount of blood, their ability to survive that event when it's, for instance, bleeding from an arm or a leg is only around 20%. But if you can get a tourniquet applied or stop the bleeding with compression before they go into shock, then they have a 90% chance of surviving. So time is of the essence. When someone's starting to go in shock, it's not unusual for them to get really thirsty. That's actually a natural response. It has to do with hormones that are released from your brain that are telling you your blood pressure is dropping and blah, 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 blah. But the bottom line is, it's not unusual to get confused and say that your mouth is dry and you feel thirsty. But you're absolutely right. You really shouldn't give that person something to drink in that moment. Just reassure them, make sure help is on the way, and stop the bleed.
Absolutely. Make sure they don't get up and start walking around.
Yes. Now, the Stop the Bleed campaign is a national campaign, which is housed within the American College of Surgeons in the Department of Homeland Security, and it's a program that grew out of the Sandy Hook tragedy. And the program basically wants to teach the public to be first responders in the setting of severe bleeding. But our focus has really been on 3 areas, including schools, our local campus and communities that are at high risk for gun violence, recognizing that mass shootings, again, are only 1% of gun violence, and the rest is really quite disproportionately experienced as suicide and urban violence.
And how would you define urban violence?
There was a researcher here in St. Louis that passed away in the last year, Norman Smith, who described the experience of St. Louis citizens and St. Louis young people as one in which people lived at risk, and that risk was inescapable. And he was very, very, very interested in the experience of youth experiencing the sort of school to prison pipeline and how frequently youth were in harm's way and frequently in the legal justice system. I really learned a lot about the concept of the saturation of certain urban environments with repeated episodes of violence that put the entire neighborhood and region at risk for violence. And that's not just gun violence, but that's a scenario in which untreated, unhealed, uncured hurts perpetuate into more hurt. There's a saying that we have that today's victim is tomorrow's perpetrator. And the idea that whether it's a gun or a punch or a stab or sexual violence or verbal assault, that people steeped in risk and exposed to violence have inescapable reality in their lives that unfortunately perpetuates more and more and more violence. And the question is how we can sort of stop that cycle. The website for the public to find access to is bleedingcontrol.org. Bleedingcontrol.org. That website gives you access to local classes that are happening in your community and groups that are doing this Stop the Bleed training. There are groups all over the country working really hard to make sure everyone has this information. The one thing I will say is the tremendous thanks I have to people in the community who are gun violence survivors. I cannot and do not even try to imagine the experience of either yourself or a loved one being affected by a bullet. And even though I've been there many, many times, by the grace of God, it's never happened to me. But it's many of those survivors have contributed to the work that I'm doing here, contribute to the community around them, stay strong for their families, whether it's a suicide or an accidental shooting, a mass shooting, or urban violence. It still hurts in a way that is unbelievable. And for those who are survivors and keep going and keep living and keep trying, I am very, very grateful, totally indebted. I really want their stories to be known and heard because we all have a lot to learn from them.
Lori, thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Lori Punch is an acute and critical care surgeon at the Barnes Jewish Hospital. She trains residents to be first responders in Ferguson, Missouri.
You know, I think in the show we've spoken to so many survivors, right, of trauma, and they want to use that experience and go out in the community and make change. But what's really interesting about Dr. Punch is that, you know, she's helping survivors of gun violence, but she's never been through it. Yet she's dedicated her life and she's created these workshops that survivors are coming to her and we're getting such meaning out of this. And I think that is just it's just nice to see people caring.
Yeah, and to see a real need, that was something as a doctor that she was seeing, all the cases of gun violence and injuries and wounds coming in. Mm-hmm. And so she, knowing that she can't just, not to say Dr. Punch couldn't go out on the streets and just collect all the guns, but knowing okay, there's a very real need, instead of being in denial about it and waiting for legislation or something else to kick in, it's what can be done now that's life-saving. That's amazing that it's worked, that people are, telling her that now that they have this skill, especially in the trauma of the minutes after someone is shot.
It kind of reminds me of the benefits of self-defense classes, right? You feel empowered. You feel more confident when you go out in the world, and just because you know what to do if this does happen. And I think that's probably part of it, right? There's that, you don't feel so hopeless or helpless, that like, resisting learned helplessness. Self-defense for life in different ways, you know?
Absolutely. And being an informed person and more equipped to help people.
Yes. It'd be nice to have more stuff in my arsenal.
Totally. I feel like in a past life I was a war nurse because for some reason I'm not afraid of blood. But I do comedy. I'm not in the medical field, but being out and about, it's good to know stuff, you know, especially, there's just so much going on, especially here, car crashes galore. I see car crashes all the time.
Yes.
Or at least the aftermath.
I know, same. It's really bad. People drive here really bananas. So all the more reason to learn this sort of stuff and like intervening and like being mindful of just like how to be a good bystander.
That's it for this episode of iSurvivor. Thank you to Rachel Farn and Dr. Lori Punch for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. If you're listening on a smartphone, just tap or swipe the cover art and find some information you might have missed.
You'll also find our email address there, iSurvivor@wondery.com, and links to our Facebook group and social media profiles. We'd love to hear your stories. And if you like this show, we'd love you to give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. Tell your friends and show them how to subscribe.
This episode was hosted by me, Jenna Brister, and Wagatwe Wanjuki. Audio engineering by Sergio Enriquez. Sound design by Bay Area Sound. Produced by Leah Sutherland. Executive produced by Abby Fentress Swanson. Executive produced by Marshall Louie and Hernan Lopez for Wondery.